in the media may also be audibly or visually recording this meeting. I would also like to remind you that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. As we're in council chambers today, I ask that you, committee members, press the request to speak button on the screen in front of you when you wish to speak to an issue or item today. I will also remind you to address your remarks through the chair during the meeting today. Let's move on to the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda for today?
Through you, Chair, yes, we have several changes on the agenda today. I will read through them. We have communications item 5.1, which is correspondence from the Waterdown East Flamborough Heritage Society respecting its annual fall book fair on October 19th, 2019. We have consent items, heritage permit applications, delegated approvals, heritage permit application HP 2019-024, proposed master bedroom restoration at 610 York Boulevard, heritage permit application HP 2019-25, proposed alteration of driveway at 24 Union Street, Waterdown, heritage permit application HP 2019-26, proposed alteration of storm windows at 13 to 15 Inglewood Drive, and item 7.2, which is for the information of the committee regarding 9 Main Street North, Waterdown, the Municipal Register of Property of Cultural Value or Interest. 7.3, which is Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee Minutes of June 25th, 2019. Item 7.4, Education and Communication Working Group Meeting Notes of July 3rd, 2019. Item 7.5 for the information of the committee respecting 292 Dundas Street East, Maple Lawn, Waterdown. We have a public hearing delegation from Mark Bader respecting Ancaster High School building and lands, which will be deferred to the next meeting as per the request from the delegate. And for distribution, you have your staff presentation respecting recommendation to designate 231 Ferguson Avenue South, Hamilton, the Ferguson Avenue Pumping Station under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And that will be in the yellow copies in front of you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. After all those changes, you're going to need a break. So, may I have a motion from the committee to approve the agenda today as amended? With Graham and seconded by Janice. All in favor? Raise your hands. Any opposed? Thank you. Let's move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for today? Robin.
And 7.1 or F. And if there's any discussion on that, I can elaborate.
Thank you. Let's move on then to approval of minutes from the previous meeting. From the minutes from July the 25th, 2019, for the Heritage Committee. May I now have a motion to approve the minutes of July 25th? Karen? And seconded by David. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? So let's move on to the communications item in the agenda, 5.1, the correspondence from the Waterdown East Flamborough Heritage Society respecting its annual book fair. Can you please turn to your addendum for item 5.1? The Education Subcommittee has proposed the following. As an opportunity for public outreach, education, and community engagement, that the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee participate as an exhibitor in the upcoming Flamborough Archives and Heritage Society's 29th Annual Fall Book Fair taking place on Saturday, October the 19th, 2019 in Fellowship Hall at St. James United Church, 306 Parkside Drive in Waterdown, and that an exhibitor table of 6 feet in length be reserved for the cost of $25, paid for through the appropriate budget. What is the committee's wish for this?
Beneficial for us to attend. I think we should go.
If there is no other discussion, may I have a mover and a seconder to approve the motion? David's moving and seconded from Janice. And can I have a show of hands to vote in favor of this motion? Any opposed? Thank you. So let's move on to the consent items in the agenda today. And 7.1, the heritage permit applications, the delegated approvals. Due to a clerical error, delegated approval items were not forwarded to the Heritage Committee as they came out of the Permit Review Subcommittee. Over the next few meetings, we'll be catching up on these approvals. As per the Ontario Heritage Act, Section 33 and 15 and 16, for individually designated buildings, Part 4, and Section 42, 16 and 17 of Heritage Conservation Districts, Part 5, the committee receives these items for their information. May I have a motion to receive items 7.1A to 7.1M? Janice and Tim, or is there discussion first?
Chair, if I could direct this to Miranda. The 7.1M, on the back, it lists Maureen Wilson as the councillor, and this is in Ward 2. So has she requested that?
Sorry, so through the chair to Janice. That was just simply a clerical mistake. We have old forms and they're related to the old boundaries, and we just happened to miss that one.
Not that it was an old boundary through the chair, but that's okay, I get it.
Be an amendment done for that, for 7.1M. So let me go back to, may I have a motion to receive items 7.1A to 7.1M, including M as amended, or will, to be amended, sorry. All in favor? And any opposed? Thank you. This next item, 7.2, has been forwarded to the committee for information. And it's 7.2 related to 9 Main Street North in Waterdown. Would staff like to speak to this item today?
Through the chair. So as with the other motions that come forward, this is just for receival and information. It is according to the Ontario Heritage Act. The Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee must be consulted prior to any property legally going in the register. So this is sort of the form of the consultation, is just to let you know.
Okay. May I have a motion then to receive this item from the committee? So Lynn and David, seconded. All in favor? Can I have a show of hands to receive this item? Thank you. Moving on to 7.3, the Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee, the minutes of the June the 25th, 2019 meeting. May I have a motion? If there's no discussion, I'll wait a second for the committee to look at it if they haven't already. May I have a motion to receive the item from the committee? From David and seconded by Will. All in favor? Can I have a show of hands? Is anyone opposed? No, thank you. So moving on to 7.4, the Education and Working Group meeting minutes from July the 3rd, 2019. I'll give the committee a few minutes to read it, and if there's any, to see if there's any discussion. If not, may I have a motion to receive the Education and Communication Working Group minutes? Thank you, Janice, and seconded by David. And can I have a show of hands for all in favor? And any opposed? Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 7.5 for the information of the committee related to 292 Dundas Street East in Maple Lawn in Waterdown. This item's been forwarded to the committee for information. Would staff like to speak to this item today?
So through the chair, similar to the motion for 9 Main Street, similar action. In order for a property to be included on the register, we do have to consult with the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee. So moving forward, we're bringing this as for your information.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, may I have a motion to receive the item today? Lynn, and seconded by Tim. And can I have a show of hands in favor? Is anyone opposed? Thank you. Moving on to delegations in the agenda today. We now have one delegation that was approved at a previous meeting. The delegation from Mr. Mark Bader will be heard at our next meeting on the 19th of September. Today's delegate is Susan O'Rourke. I'd like to welcome Susan before the committee. You'll be given 5 minutes to speak today. Thank you. And this is, sorry, one last thing. This is respecting 745 Crooks Hollow Road in Dundas.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm here today. I'm the owner of 745 Crooks Hollow Road with, like, the bank. There is a mortgage on the property. I am asking respectfully that the members reconsider their decision to recommend to include Crooks Hollow in the Municipal Register of Property of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest. And just by a brief background, the committee made the recommendations on April 18th after hearing from the Inventory and Research Working Group. This then went to Planning Committee on April 30th and to Council May 8th. Then on May 8th, with the help and a motion brought by Councillor Vanderbeek, that the consideration of including the property in the register be referred back to this committee to provide me with an opportunity to delegate, and that's why I'm here today. Why I'm asking it, not to be placed on the register or to be given more time if you're not satisfied with what I say today, to withdraw the recommendation, these are my reasons. It impacts on my ability to enjoy and use the property, including the financial consequences. I also don't think that either the committee members or I have all the information about this matter and the financial impact. I say this because my review of the information indicates, number one, the working group would like the staff to put this on the work list for designating the property. So this is just not about going on the register. Number two, information about the neighboring property, 769 Crooks Hollow, which was used and referred to in support of the recommendation that my property be designated, is not privately owned. That property, from the inquiries I've made, is owned by the Hamilton Conservation Authority. And this information does not appear to have been before the committee when the motion recommending the property be placed on the register was moved. My caveat to that is I tried to watch the proceedings, but the video was not working. So if I'm mistaken, I apologize. But the value of this property, from what I can obtain, the neighboring property is a lot less. The taxes are a lot less. And what I'm asking, or what I'm looking at, is there's a probability that years ago, when it was designated, it was on consent because it was in the ownership of Hamilton Conservation. I've paid taxes, land transfer taxes, property taxes based on the land value of Crooks Hollow. I also think it's really important that, sorry, I can hear my voice cracking, I'm just trying to do it in the 5 minutes, that any decision that fundamentally affects a person, as it does me, be thorough, fair, and wholesome. In this regard, I just want to give you a little bit of background about the events leading up to today to help you better understand why I'm asking for this. I purchased this property in December 2017. It was advertised as vacant land. It was listed on MLS. There was no bidding. I just purchased it. When I say owned, there's a property, there's a mortgage on the property. In purchasing the property, I followed due process with a real estate lawyer to ensure myself that title was free and clear. There was inquiries made at the building department. A declaration was obtained from the owner who had owned it, I understand, from 1963. There was no encumbrances on the property to interfere with how the property was used. There wasn't any involvement with the Niagara Escarpment, the Hamilton Conservation Authority, and I've already mentioned it was advertised as vacant land. The home, to see it, was basically very few, if anything, people would be able to reside in it at the time. There was a number of safety issues, including an oil tank that was 25 years old, a water heater that went back to when Hydro used to rent them out, and there wasn't even a proper wall in the back. It was a slim piece of paper that we've since put plywood on. I do have obligations under the mortgage, as I know many of you would appreciate those, having had to hold them yourselves. I have to ensure that the property is properly insured to meet my obligations under my mortgage, and I've at all times kept the bank informed of what is happening and adjusted the insurance appropriately. And I'm sure you can also appreciate I can't take a building down when there's a mortgage on it without proper notification. In April 2019, I received a call from Mr. Skinner, a very nice gentleman from the building department here, advising me of what had taken place. I explained to him I had a very ambitious young son who, in his ambition, in trying to clean up the property, may have overlooked the fact that there were certain steps that he had to take. But he didn't do it maliciously. It was in earnest and in trying to improve and ensure the safety of the property. In the meantime, I received a letter from under the signature of Miss Bruton, who I've since met with, letting me know that on April 19th, I believe, there was a meeting coming forward to this committee. I did not get that in enough time for the committee, and you can appreciate that was mailed, and it was a very short period of time for me to respond. And I had no knowledge, and that's why I give you the background, that there being any consideration of any historical value in this property whatsoever. And then there was another meeting that went to the planning committee, and on that day I was trying, and I'm new to this, I was trying to find out when the planning committee was. Well, it had already happened. Hence the reason I sought the assistance and was very appreciative of Ms. Vanderbeek's and her office assistants, as I have been with everyone here in terms of staff that have helped me understand this process and what I need to do. So I had no knowledge. I went through the due diligence, and then I find myself in this position now having to ask you to reconsider. And but what I have found, and I think I just want to share, that I'm reviewing the documents that were prepared by the working group. This process was already in place by November 2018. I had owned the home for over a year. What I subsequently learned in trying to make inquiries, the owner of the property died sometime in November, December 2018, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exact date. Also, things I found out that in 1985, there were a number of properties designated, including 769 Crooks Hollow. The questions I'm asking myself now, and I need to get more information about, is that this property that I now own, 745 Crooks Hollow, that owner, it has been was in the ownership of the same family since 1963. So I have to assume that the designation that took place in 1985 was for the most part on consent. And that's why I bring up that one of the properties is currently owned by the Conservation Authority. Possibly it was opposed at that time, I don't know. But what I do know is that, nothing happened all that time, and the property, unfortunately, may have, in terms of the value, you can see from the pictures of it, it may not have got the attention that maybe some other people would have given it. And that's why I mentioned the state of the property when it was purchased and how it was advertised. So the property is still very much there. The building's still very much there. I feel I'm not sure what my next steps are because I have to work, and I will work with Mr. Skinner in the building department. But to have this placed on the inventory, knowing that really the next steps are moving to designation, has a significant impact. And I'm just saying, as a private property owner and doing the due diligence I did, I would just ask that you take that into consideration in terms of, because of the consequences. I also note, and I just share this with you, that the property, it's just not me who may not recognize its value. The city took down some trees earlier this year, and you'll see it in the pictures. Unfortunately, there's a cement sort of structure, a fence, so to speak, and some of that in cutting the trees, unfortunately, was impacted. So when I bought the property, the family members asked if they could, there was a cupboard, I believe possibly, that their father had built, and I said, sure, you could take that, but within the inside, there's not much, and there's been additions and things that have happened to the property. So my focus really as a property owner is making sure I meet my obligations to the bank, make sure that it's safe, and I would like to be able to move forward and do what I can do with my resources to make it a place where I can enjoy. And having said that, I think that anybody that's dealt with me has, I've worked cooperatively with people. If there's something in particular that you're looking from the property, but I am just being very honest. There's really not a lot, and any quotes that I've obtained for it are significant. I might have gone a bit over the 5, but I tried to stay within that.
That's okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. O'Rourke today? Graham.
I was the one who went and physically did the appraisal of the property from the road, because obviously it's private property, we're not stepping on it. There's a lot of features from the road we can see that are still, looks very original. And with the work being done in the inside without the permits and stuff being sought, we as a committee were afraid that something might happen to it. So we're trying to protect that house. There's a lot of history to the home. Old history, like the Morden family. We're very important to that area, and we like to protect their home. We already lost one of their houses in that neighborhood. So we're trying to protect our last one.
Are there any other questions? Janice.
Through the chair, and I'd like to direct this to staff. Listening to, it's Susan?
Yes, Susan.
I'm sorry, I've forgotten the last name. I'm sorry. Through the chair again to someone on staff. How does the process or the procedure or the practice that we engage in with designations and owners as opposed to adding people to the registry? Is there a difference? I'm just looking at her timelines and notification and I wondered if there was a difference between the two. Thank you.
So through the chair, for register additions, it's not outlined in the Ontario Heritage Act to give notice, but City of Hamilton approved City Council procedure does it as a courtesy. So we sort of let people know as soon as possible. This allows them the time to come speak to the committee, to speak to planning committee, to have a chance to have their voice heard. And then ultimately, the decision can be made to put it on the register or not. For example, Susan's not the only person who came forward. The owners of another property in this batch also spoke to the councillor about what they wanted to do with the property, and they ultimately decided to put that property in the register. But now Susan has the opportunity to speak to you to see if you want to go on the register or if there's an alternative route that you would like to see happen with this property. In terms of designations, it's a little bit more laid out in terms of specific procedures and notifications and larger notifications that go in the newspaper and so forth. I'm sure David, once he goes through his presentation, will be talking about that procedure.
Please follow up, Janice.
Again, through the chair. Oh my God, don't tell me I've lost it. I really like that question. Hold it. Excuse me. I can't remember. Isn't that awful? I am so sorry. Yeah, I'll come back to it because it was a good question. Synapses are still firing. So this question has to do, again, with properties added to the register, other than those as part of the downtown built heritage, the Durand built heritage, now the Waterdown built heritage. How many do we potentially, or you potentially see in a year? In other words, I guess what I'm asking is how onerous is it to work a little bit more closely or earlier on with our proponent, as was not the case? Question. Thank you.
So in terms of, say, number of registered additions in 1 year, I may not be the best equipped to ask that question simply because I haven't been with the City of Hamilton for a year, so I don't know the exact statistics. But there's also a couple of different routes. So whether it's through, say, a motion that we've seen here, or it's through the route of the Inventory and Research Committee going through and adding it on, or a third route, as you said, in terms with, say, secondary, alongside secondary plan research, where they do a larger inventory and do sort of a mass add. So, which means the numbers can essentially fluctuate from maybe 100 or so to 3 or 4 per year.
You have a question, Karen? Please go ahead.
No, I'm not finished. Okay. It's working now? Okay. So I have a question, Susan. Is your concern about being on the register that you would be asked to do things that you weren't thinking of doing to your property, or is your concern more that it would be hurdles for you to go through if there's anything you wanted to do of your own volition?
I think both. It just, in terms of financially, in terms of whether I'd be able to afford it, any subsequent value in the property afterwards. So it has a significant impact, and that's why I raised the issue about the neighboring property, which is, it's owned by the Metro Conservation Authority. If you look into its actual value, it's about 1/3 of what this value of this property. And so, and like if I am to keep it for my family, and it may not be practical once I get the quotes to keep it in the form that it is, and I will have lost an opportunity. My hands will be tied, and that's how it feels right now, which is I went through the legal process, the due process, and with the bank to satisfy myself, here was a piece of property that was free and clear of any type of limitations. So whether I choose that the best route is to try and use the existing structure as it is, or come to a conclusion after consulting like architects, like right now it has a septic system and a well for a very small home, and a home that most people in this day would not be content or be able to live in. And that might have been it in 1860. And like, you have to see this home. There's no, and never was, from the time I saw it, any architectural features inside. The basement, in terms of the water, I have asthma, and you could feel it. At closing, like I said, when they realized that the age of the, not appliances, but like the certain things, the furnace, the tank, I mean, I couldn't even close without making sure I had was able to satisfy the insurance of that the steps I would do. And in an honest effort, and maybe, and this is where I'm taking responsibility for my young adult son, it was meant to try and understand what we were dealing with. So and that's where I'm just saying, I'm honestly struggling. I'm not trying to say, ignore the committee's concerns, but I'm trying to say, like, when my daughter-in-law looked at it, she broke down and cried to think that there was a possibility she was expected to live there. And I mean, I'm just saying that is how the property would present to most people, even inside. I'm not trying to be critical of the work crew who cut down the trees. They were dealing with a safety issue with the wiring, but they weren't even cognizant of like the brick wall with concrete. So that's where I'm struggling and saying, why now? I have owned this property properly, due process, arm's length. I'd never seen it until I saw the MLS. And and then to be faced with this now, that I feel I'm almost doing something wrong and failing the community. And I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to be a reasonable person to say, here's the situation. There wasn't notice even when it was purchased. So it's not that I'm not caring and I'm saying we gave the family who had been there for since 1963, the adult children, there was some things that I thought they would enjoy. And that's what I'm saying with the committee. I'll work with you. Like if there's things in particular you think that you would like from the home, but there's really wood, like inside, like some of the heavier timbers that was built, but there's been add-ons, there's all sorts of safety issues. So I don't know if that answers your question, and it's too long, but it's overwhelming now what I am faced with. And like most of you, or all of you, I work full-time. I have a mother who's suffering from cognitive vascular dementia. I'm primary caregiver. So I'm trying to balance everybody's concerns. So, sir, I'm not trying to ignore it. I don't know the community, but I'm just saying there's already, next to that property, a house that, from my description, it was in really good shape. The inside had architectural features. And sadly, long before my time, that was lost at 745, except for the outside structure. And if you have looked at it from the road, you'll see that that too, in terms of the pillars, have deteriorated. I mean, that home had been vacant for some time before I purchased it, as I understand. But you might know more than I do, because you're part of the community. So I'm turning to the people that I think that can help to say, I'm not being dismissive, but I would just sincerely ask that you consider the significant impact on me as you balance your responsibility on this committee. And I think there's a way to work that would allow me to do what's necessary for the property, not have it devalued. And I can't demolish it, and I'm not saying I will, but I can't, again, without proper due process. And I don't think that there's anything that I've done, with the exception, like I said, my son being very zealous, or if that's the correct pronunciation, and thinking that with the wiring and everything was just hodgepodge, and it was dangerous. And the insurer absolutely knows I'm paying a very high premium right now to keep that building properly insured, because I honor my obligations to my mortgage.
Go ahead, Graham, if you have a question.
Okay, the property came to our attention as a committee by area residents. Came to the working, like the inventory research working group, an area resident. And by the time we got a chance to go look at it, it was rather late. Because of the, okay, by the time we got a chance to look at it, it was a few months after. So you said about coming to our attention beginning in November. We didn't get a chance to look at the property until I think it was late February or March because of the weather. There's no parking along that street, so we have to get to the parking lot at the conservation land. I couldn't get in there. So that's when we finally got a chance to look at it and recommend it. Now, we don't expect people to work miracles. If there's nothing inside, you can't preserve the inside, can you? So if we do recommend designation and it goes there, it's not going to impact the inside of the house because there's nothing there to preserve. We worry more about preservation. So like on your property, there's 2 windows on the one side that look original, and the front door package looks original, and the porch looks like it's an old addition. We would like that kind of stuff preserved. But the addition at the back, that's just immaterial. You understand what we're talking about? So when you work with the planning department, you're not going to have issues with those kind of things. The wiring, we don't care. That's not historical. You understand what we're talking about?
Like, I'm just not sure of my role. Like, here, am I supposed to, I don't want to, I'm just saying.
What I'm saying is don't be afraid about being put on the registry. It's not like it's going to remove all your property owner's rights. We're just going to try to preserve parts that can be preserved, and other parts, they don't merit the protection because they're not old or original.
But as I understand it then, though, whatever I would be restricted, and I'm saying, if I'm coming here and saying I'm prepared to work with you, I have a mortgage, I have responsibilities. I'm trying to understand why there has to be, it has to be registered. If you have somebody who's properly paying taxes, now is hearing you, and is going to work with the committee, I don't understand what necessitates that, because from your point of view, and I'm saying generally, it may not think that it's an encumbrance, but it is. Like, the reality is it is, because it affects everything I understood in purchasing a property, and that was legally identified. So I'm saying, I'm hearing, I'm listening, and I just wanted to also say the reason I got the date of November was because it was on the preliminary evaluation. So I didn't make, like, that date.
No, I'm not saying you made it up. I'm just saying by the time we got a chance to get there.
No, but according to this, the information about what you've just shared with me was November. So that's what I'm relying on. I just don't want anybody to think here that I'm saying something that's
you're
not
not.
true. So at some point in November, a preliminary evaluation was done and relied upon, like 2018. But that was also a year after I purchased it. And I struggled, like I checked the property, and as recently on Tuesday when I was there is somebody expressing an interest to buy this property who is in the community and who approached my son. So I'm just saying, if you look at it from my point of view, I'm going, what the heck is happening here? And you've already shared with me, it was the neighbors that brought it to your attention. So now that I've heard that, and now I share with you that somebody has written a note to my son who knows of the property, who had spoken to him, and is expressing an interest in the property. And I'm just saying, that makes me concerned about this whole process. I'm not attributing it to anything to anybody here, because I've said all the staff and anybody that I've had the ability to speak to have been more than fair and helpful, because I'm not a developer or a builder or any of that. I am a working person who saw a property that, so to speak, we fell in love with.
Okay, so the reason we would put something on the registry is to protect it, that's it. So under the present, if you're not on the registry, within 10 days of applying for a demolition permit must be issued. That's the law, right? Plain and simple.
But I would advise
No,
you.
you have no requirement right now to advise us. You can only,
I would.
well, you just have to go to the planning department and buy a permit, and must be granted. All it does now is give us 60-day protection.
But again, I'm just saying, I'm relying on the fact of, again, where my concern is what you said in your first comment, that this is a building, another one was lost, and that what's in the paperwork, the plan or the intention, it moved forward to designation. And so, sorry, I don't want to repeat myself, and I know you have many other things that you've got to.
That was my recommendation, yes.
Lynn, do you have a question?
My question is, when you bought the property, what were you planning to do with it? Demolish the house, or?
Honestly, we didn't know. We just knew it was an opportunity, and because of finances, that's why my son started in terms of looking at whether it was possible to salvage the structure, like from an affordability point of view, because it was a very expensive property. So we knew we did not have the resources, quite frankly, to look at a demolition at that point. And so the value, sorry. I think it's what it is. It was just supposed to be such a beautiful, happy thing in terms of like my son went to McMaster. He's a runner, and I don't know why I'm crying. This is not supposed to be emotional, but it was just, it was a bit of a dream, and that we as a family would be able to have this property and the fact that it had been in this one family's, had it since 1963. And, you know, ignorance is bliss. But like, so I keep going to say, we did it properly. There's, I didn't even know Christie Lake was in the backyard. And then subsequent to that, you know, my son got the kayaks and etc. And I have two other girls. They're both in the armed forces. And so they don't live here. One is in Nova Scotia, and actually one has just come back from Nova Scotia and is stationed in Ottawa. And it just so happens that son, who I love dearly, but he's out in Vancouver now. He just got a transfer for a year. But they're all athletic, and they're runners, and they just love the property. The house, they were all tentative, but so that's to answer your question. We weren't sure. We just knew as a family it was a beautiful spot, and so a very quick decision was made to purchase what is still a lovely property. But now it just seems we're so burdened with like what we had hoped and dreamed for. So, I mean, practically, I really just have to wait the decision of this committee to know where I go. But what I can say is I will work with the committee if there's something in particular that the committee would like to have or see. But from what I understand of the house, the biggest thing is the wood. A young man that comes in and looks at it says, whoa, like that wood would make a really great table. Like it's because the thickness and the beams and everything. So again, I'm sorry, but I can say right now, I don't have the financial resources I'm just trying to manage my obligations under the mortgage, meet the taxes to the city of Hamilton, which in themselves are significant. I don't begrudge, but that's what my efforts are. Keep it in good standing, and the insurance, so I don't default under any mortgage.
Thank you. Tim, do you have a question? I think actually Councillor Pearson was ahead of me. Okay, then I'll hand it over to Councillor Pearson and come back to you, Tim.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the presentation. My apologies for coming in a bit late. We had another meeting earlier. I did hear part of your presentation in the anteroom. First and foremost, I'm Councillor Maria Pearson, and I've been on Heritage Committee now since 1991 in Stoney Creek and in Hamilton. I'm very proud of it. I want you to know that in no way is the intent here to burst your dream. And I don't think anyone around this table would want to see that happen, because that's not what we're about. We're certainly appreciative that you understand the value of something you've purchased, because you always had the love to buy it. So don't lose that love, okay? I want you to rest assured. I know that our staff, and I want clarification from our staff, currently the request is only that it goes on the list. So it is on a list, which as a previous member mentioned as well. It just means if you were to, and I understand, you know, you say, well, you're not going to, you would come and talk to us before you decided to tear it down. Unfortunately, in this day and age, we have properties changing hands, and we have strange things happening occasionally where you may not even control it any longer, and then we assume that something would come back, and it doesn't. By putting it on a list, it means that it's red flagged if somebody does come in and apply for a demolition permit. And it protects the property that you love and that we want to see preserved in some way. So I want you to understand that's why we do this. And I will ask staff, if I could, through Charles, how many are on the list right now, and what would we be looking at as far as timelines? Because the list is long. It's not tomorrow or a year from now that this could be done. So maybe if staff could clarify.
Hi, through the chair. So the request right now, first for the property, is to add it to the register and add it to the work plan. The work plan currently goes to 20, 35, 36.
There you go,
And
2035.
probably upwards of 70 properties or so. And 2035 is the target date, but not for sure. And including it on the register, as everyone's saying too, it's puts a hold for 60 days for demolition. But in terms of any other types of building permits, that doesn't stop you from, say, if you want to place 3 windows or anything else. Heritage staff are notified if a property is included on the register, even on the inventory, and so forth, that this has come forward. And this gives us an opportunity to say either, hey, it's okay, or to reach out to the applicant to sort of discuss what they're doing, but it doesn't prevent you from doing any of those changes and alterations that you want to do.
Exactly. Thank you for clarifying that. And I want you to leave feeling confident that your hands aren't going to be tied. And I can tell you, it never fails at Planning Committee. Mr. Robichaud's, Yvette, staff can say, we always get the comment that, well, you've devalued my property because you've designated it. There has been absolutely no proof at all, and we've gone out to the real estate industry, et cetera, to verify this. So I want you to rest assured it's not a matter of devaluing your property. I don't believe there should be any issue with your mortgage. Your mortgage companies have their reasons. It has nothing to do with heritage. It has to do with the safety of the home and the value of the home. That's what they look at. And at this point, I would not say that you would ever lose a value because it has a designation that may be years out of the way. Any things that, and I appreciate that possibly offline, it might be an appropriate thing to maybe meet with staff and just sit down and go over some of the concerns so you can feel a little bit more comfortable. I understand, because I haven't been to the property. I tried to Google it to see if I could see it, but I can't. All I see is a laneway. And I'm sure it's gorgeous in behind and probably a beautiful little house. So there may be some features, but I don't want you going home and being worried and losing sleep over it, because as we said, it's a work plan. It's a number of years out. And our staff are very receptive to working with all heritage property owners. And, if there is something that does pop up, you can discuss it with your ward councillor. You can bring it back to us. I'm more than happy to facilitate whatever, if I can, if need be. But at this point, I'll leave it up to committee, and I believe there was a reason this was done. My gosh, it was built in 1860. It must be absolutely gorgeous as far as a little cottage home. So I would love to see it someday. And I hope that you bought it with the intent of some future family use there. And that's basically what we'd like to see done. So I'm hoping that I've alleviated and our staff have alleviated some of your concerns today. Thank you.
And I think for me, it's just knowing that the property next door is a bigger property and it's being valued at so much less. So that's what I'm going on, like it's not conjecture, if you know what I mean?
No, so understand, it's valued at less, so I won't get into what was purchased and when MPAC does the evaluation, because that's totally up to the MPAC, which is your Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. It has nothing to do with the city. It has nothing to do with designation. It's totally what MPAC values the property at. So I'm going to say, probably in an assumption, the property next door has an older evaluation because it hasn't sold for a number of years. You purchased it for whatever, and MPAC has now assigned that purchase price as the value of the property. That's probably what has happened, but we have no control over that. So I can't say why the property next door is. It has nothing to do with us, and it has nothing to do with the fact that this could potentially be designated, that your property value would change. So I just want to help you understand that process, okay?
Tim, do you have a question?
I don't want to double press. Let's keep it going here. Yeah, it's. I guess it's good to comment at the end here because a lot of my comments have already been addressed. But I did want to make the point that a lot of us sitting around this table here are owners of designated properties and understand the wide ranges of perception versus realities of them. And it's a daunting task. And the problem, I think, comes back to not getting enough information to you, the homeowner, which I think staff is wonderfully starting to rectify that process, where they will really be educating on what the steps mean, because I honestly feel that you did not really get the proper comprehension of what all of it means before today, but hopefully today you have a better understanding of what all of these things mean. I understand homeownership, it's an emotional thing, it's a very personal thing, and it's too much to go into in this committee, of a septic tank is not designated, or these sorts of things, but it is the reality that this is a helping committee and it has to have some kind of procedure behind it, or else we won't be able to, help this property, let alone yourself. So that's my comment.
So if I can offer a comment as well, to echo some of what I've heard today. Mr. O'Rourke, I mean, you've certainly done nothing wrong. You shouldn't feel that way whatsoever. As Tim mentioned and others, we're all homeowners too in Hamilton. Our home is our castle, and we feel very emotional about it too, so you're amongst kindred spirits today on this one. By no means, and I'm going to echo again, perhaps I'm being repetitive here, no one in this committee wants you to reside in a non-livable environment. Most of what I heard, I think I heard you say you should go ahead and do. If it's a septic tank, you should live your life. Heritage is not in conflict with living in a modern lifestyle. I would recommend touching base with, in fact, maybe it's worth doing more than that, talking with staff in a little greater detail. But from what I understand, short of a demolition, most of what I think I heard you say is something you can and should do to maintain your lifestyle in such a beautiful home. So, as mentioned, being on the register is very different than being designated, and the only protection, and many people look at this as a very positive thing. If you love your home as much as many of us love our homes, having protection if you're not there anymore or something else happens is a good thing. So, and as Tim and others have said, we've owned heritage properties in the past. I've bought and sold one. It certainly didn't impact, I've said this to many people, it certainly didn't impact a heritage registered property, like what you're talking about. It didn't impact me. So I'm saying all of this so that you hopefully go home and feel a lot less stress about your property. From what I can tell looking at it, it does look like a beautiful home. I mean, it's, I don't know all the details, but I can't imagine what would happen if the walls could talk in your house. What's gone on in there and what's happened over the years. So I don't have a question for you other than wishing you good luck with this property, right? And as I said, please do not get stressed. You shouldn't get stressed over this. There's no reason to be stressed over this. But I appreciate that it is complicated and it is daunting at times, and I do believe staff will work with you initially on understanding, and beyond that, the timelines are so far out in the future. It's certainly nothing to be stressed about in the short term. Again, perhaps easy for me to say, but I faced a very similar circumstance to you, and did okay with that. Anyway, thank you. Are there no other questions? Oh, Councillor Pearson.
To know, Lauren, this is being webcast, is that correct? It is being webcast. I see you taking notes very diligently. So I want you to know, that this is being recorded, and you can access it on the computer for this meeting today and go into the video, and you'll be able to see everything that just got discussed here. I see you diligently writing down, okay?
item on the agenda is the staff presentation for 9.1. It's the recommendation to designate 231 Ferguson Avenue South in Hamilton. It's the Ferguson Avenue pumping station. Is staff going to comment on this today? Or David, you will be commenting on it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you. Yes, I'll be available for any questions after the presentation. So this is a presentation in regards to the recommendation to designate the property at 231 Ferguson Avenue South under Part 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So 231 Ferguson Avenue South is home to the Ferguson pumping station, Ferguson Avenue pumping station, which, as you may or may not know, is it's a fairly key facility representing the evolution of municipal waterworks throughout the latter half of the 19th century and into the 20th century. So moving from sort of steam technology in the latter half of the 19th century into the electric era in the 20th century and throughout the 20th century. As well, it was an important response to the fire prevention and the requirements and needs for potable water supplies. Throughout the 20th century and earlier, but also was a fairly important precondition to the development that would follow throughout the 20th century and the population boom and industrial boom in Hamilton. Just in terms of its location, the facility is located on the east side of Ferguson Avenue South. And I'll see if this works. Right here. So just south of Charlton Avenue and north of the escarpment, and directly across the street from Foster Street there. Here's an aerial map showing the facility. And so that's the facility right there, and there was a new pumping station there that was built just to the east in 2012. So currently the old structure, the structure that we're looking at designating, it's been decommissioned. It's currently vacant. Here's the front elevation fronting onto Ferguson Avenue, so that's the west elevation. So I'll show you a diagram in a second that shows the evolution of the facility on the site, but the 1912, 1913 portion is that right there. And this is the section that was built in 1929, 1930, and this was built circa 1985. So the facility was expanded throughout the 20th century. It is a city-owned site. The property has been home to Municipal Waterworks since 1878, when the first water pumping station was built. In 2011, the City of Hamilton received a third-party request for the property's designation. It was added to the Municipal Heritage Register in 2012 and also to the designation work plan in the same year. The city's Public Works Department has explored options for the facility's reuse, and a cultural heritage assessment has been completed by Golder Associates, which has recommended the property's designation as it's met all city and provincial criteria. Okay, so as I mentioned, here's a little bit of a map on the right-hand side, just showing the evolution of the site. So I'll first talk about just quickly go over the evolution of the site, then generally just provide a very brief overview of municipal waterworks in the city of Hamilton over the years. So again, you can see at the north section there is a 1912, 1913 block. And to the south of that was the extension, 1929, 1930. And so lastly, that little piece at the southern end was the 1955 extension. The original building was built just to the south of the 1912, 1913 block. As you can see on the right, there's a new pumping station there as well, built in 2012. So I'll just quickly go over the evolution of waterworks in Hamilton. So beginning in 1854, there was a large cholera outbreak that really necessitated the need to push council towards passing a resolution establishing a municipal waterworks. There was talk, and prior to that, since the 1830s, of establishing a system to fight fires and to reduce any sort of waterborne outbreaks. But before 1854, there was a little bit of a stretch on municipal finances, and it didn't come to be until 1854. In 1855, it was determined that Lake Ontario was the best source for tapping into the water supply. Just before that, they were considering Burlington Bay, but that didn't work out because there was some controversy over the quality of the water supply that would be obtained from Burlington Bay. So Lake Ontario was determined to be the best source for domestic and industrial use based on its purity and supply, and that a pumping station would be required. So from 1857 to 1860, the station, the pump house at 900 Woodward Avenue, close to the lake, was built. And that's the grand Italian engine house and pump house, and it was officially inaugurated in 1860. By 1878, an expansion to Hamilton's waterworks was necessitated due to the growing population, and that's what was first built at 231 Ferguson Avenue. This station was to increase the supply of water to the high-level district surrounding Charlton Avenue, Forest Avenue, Herkimer Street, the escarpment, and a section on James Street. So that there is the image of the original station built in 1878. That's no longer there. Oops, sorry. So by 1911, the existing Ferguson pumping station's equipment was reported to be taxed to its limit, and was of insufficient capacity to serve the increasing demands on the water supply due to the growing population. So in order to replace the 1878 high-level pumping station, a new building was constructed in 1912, 1913 that adjoined the north side of the existing building. So this is a construction. I can see it's just being finalized of a 1912-13 station here. And just to the north, that's the 1912, 1913 station. And that was just to the right in that photo was the 1878 building that was taken down later on. To the right is a photo of the city engineer at that time, Andrew F. McCallum. So he was the city engineer who designed the building. The building was designed by city workers, and its design was noted for its combination of functional engineering requirements with a consideration of aesthetics based on an Edwardian interpretation of classical style. Just a side note on McCallum, he was the resident engineer from the Toronto, Hamilton, and Buffalo Railway, and the Minneapolis and St. Paul Railway in Chicago. He was also responsible in combination with another designer, I believe W. Edwards, for the construction of the pump house, also at 900 Woodward Avenue in 1913. So he was busy around that time. Here's an image of the pumps that were first installed in the 1912, 1913 section. So unfortunately, they're long gone. The pumps are currently in the building. I believe the oldest one might be circa 1960 approximately, and most of them are actually quite a bit newer than that, I think the 70s and 80s. So here's an image of the 1929-30 section. And so again, just because the equipment and the facility size wasn't sufficient enough over time, they created this extension. And when they built this extension, the 1878 section was demolished. This was completed under the leadership of the city engineer at that time, which was William L. McFall. And William L. McFall was also responsible for designing the Woodward water purification plant and the Longwood Bridge as well, Longwood Bridge. So this building, when this building was built, there was 3 new electric pumps installed and a 400 horsepower diesel backup generator. An additional pump was installed in 1945-46, and the building was further expanded on its south side in 55 when the 5 new pumps and electrical switching gear were installed. So it continuously just expanded and expanded over time. In terms of consultation on the recommendation to designate this property, the Water and Wastewater Division of the Public Works Department were notified of the addition of the property to the work plan in 2012. They were also notified of the cultural heritage assessment completed by Golder on the draft and on the final, and they provided comments on the draft version. The Inventory and Research Working Group of the Heritage Committee reviewed and commented on the draft and final version of the heritage assessment, as some of you are aware of. The Ward 2 Councillor has been informed of the recommendation to designate, and just as a note, prior to any designation of the property that council may go forward with, they have to consult with the Heritage Committee. In terms of the evaluation that was included in the report by Golder, they assessed the property against the criteria Ontario Regulation 906, which is a criteria to determine whether or not a property is justified for designation. So it has to meet one of 3 criteria, either design, associative, or contextual value. So I'll just quickly go over that. In terms of design, the property is representative of the early 20th century electric area waterworks and the application of Romanesque revival style to public infrastructure buildings. This style reflects a permanence and stability that's associated with classical Roman architecture. It reflects a high degree of craftsmanship in its masonry and engineering achievement and its construction, and has a high functional merit in its combination of brick, concrete I-beam, and glass materials, which could withstand heavy vibration loads for water pumping machinery. In terms of its historical value, it has direct association with the urban development theme and Hamilton's consolidation as an industrial center in the early 20th century. It reflects the work of 2 designers, who I mentioned, who are quite significant to Hamilton's history, and the former engineers, Andrew McCallum and William McFall. It was noted that it does not have significant potential to yield information that contributes to an understanding of a culture. In terms of its contextual value, the property maintains and supports the massing, setbacks, and red brick materials of the surrounding properties, and is historically, functionally, and physically linked to its surroundings, as it has been used to pump municipal water supply in the immediate area since 1878. And of note, the property was not considered to be a landmark, partially due to how well it fits into its surrounding context. In terms of the statement of cultural heritage values, I've got the heritage attributes of the building listed. So it's divided by section from the 1912 to 1913 section. For the 1912, 1913 section, the cast-in-place concrete foundation with large semicircular arches in the basement to accommodate the fairly massive piping in the basement that's obviously required for a municipal waterworks facility. The red brick load-bearing walls capped by the concrete slab coping. Pilasters terminating at a denticulated string course. The double-leaf central entrance with semicircular arch head formed with 2 orders of brick voussoirs. Sorry, my French is not very good. A prominent keystone and framed with pilasters. Window openings with semicircular heads formed with stretcher brick voussoirs, concrete imposts, and lug sills. The entablature and sheet metal clad cornice, and the open pediment with date stone. The north and south sidewalls with a water table and belt course with cogging. The surviving bay on the west side portion of the south wall with the tall segmental archhead window formed with gauged brick voussoirs and with a plain stone lug sill. The interior engaged brick and stone columns supporting a longitudinal, I-beam, and the flat roof formed with transverse I-beams with Northern Engineering Works, Michigan, USA plaques, and chain hoists on beam trolleys, and the ceiling of wood strips running lengthwise. So here's a few more photos of the interior. So the exterior wall of the 1912-13 block, it's pictured right here. So that's viewed from within the 1929-30 extension, and the Northern Engineering Works plaques on the I-beams that I just mentioned. So in terms of the 29-30 extension, the heritage attributes are the cast-in-place concrete foundation, the red brick load-bearing walls matching the original block, large semicircular headed multi-pane windows with single order of solder brick voussoir with small stones and concrete imposts and plain concrete lug sills, the corner pilasters, entablature and sheet metal clad cornice, internal chamfered freestanding columns supporting a longitudinal I-beam, 20-pane fixed sash window on the south side wall, and the flat roof formed with transverse I-beams with the notation of Herbert Morris Chain and Hoist Company Limited plaques, and chain hoists on beam trolleys, and again, the ceiling of wood strips running longitudinally. I can't say that word today, unfortunately. In terms of the heritage attributes that reflects the context, the moderate setback from the street, that's pretty much in line with the neighboring homes. The overall height and red brick construction that mirror the adjacent built heritage resources, and the visual connection with the numerous maintenance covers on the adjacent streets and sidewalks. So we've got the view facing away from the property, here looking down Foster Street, and the view looking southwest towards the pumping station from Charlton Avenue East. Right there. It's hard to see the station there, but it's just kind of fit in behind the trees there. So just to wrap things up, it's, as I mentioned, that the property does meet 7 of the 9 criteria for designation under the Heritage Act and its Regulation 906. Staff are recommending that the property be designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act. And with respect to the potential repurposing of the building that may happen sometime over the time, possibly, any proposal to convert the building will have to go through the heritage permit process, as with any designated building, and would follow the same process as we are used to. And staff are recommending that any future heritage permit application for the building's conversion be accompanied by a cultural heritage impact assessment and a conservation plan to evaluate the impact of the building's designated heritage attributes, as well to guide the long-term management of the building's non-designated industrial artifacts. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions from the committee at this time? Tim.
Just a question. This building is owned by the city of Hamilton at the moment, and you talked about potential future adaptive. Does that mean it may be sold or it may be used in?
I don't think there's been a conclusion to that yet, but it's been explored. It was explored, I believe, under the assumption that the city would retain ownership and potentially lease it out if it were to be used as office space, for example. But there's no conclusion on that just yet. So.
David, if you have a question.
I just have a comment, actually, if I could, rather than a question, Mr. Chair. Of course, this building links to the other water buildings. Just last year, there was, I believe it's last year, we designated the Connaught area as a cultural heritage site. And we have, of course, the pipeline and the museum, the steam museum, and the fountain, which of course, Gar Park Fountain, which links the whole process. And so water and electricity really defines Hamilton. And so this is very important, I think, to our heritage commitment. And just as a side or a mention, you had said that the the cholera outbreak prompted the building of the water system, and it was 3 Gage family children that died in that cholera outbreak. So that certainly prompted the development of the water system in Hamilton here. But I just want to say that I think it's very important to link all these water-connected buildings together and consider it as one heritage concept. Thank you.
Thank you, David. If there are no other questions, I just have a comment, and David mentioned this, so I want to echo it. The inventory working group examined this report and heard a lot of this information previously at our most recent meeting, and we recommended that the committee go forward with the recommendations as outlined. So we'll come to that in a few minutes, but as I said, the inventory working group has already looked at this and felt that it should be considered and move forward to the committee as a whole. Thank you. So, is there any other questions? Robin, do you have a question?
Comment? The property has been owned by the city since 1847, and just down the street is the Ferguson row house that are also designated. So it's a lovely little area for another designation, and I applaud the city for owning it and going forward with it.
Thank you. Then let's move forward. May I have a motion to receive the presentation and the comments and information from the questions? David and Will, and can I have a show of hands for all in favor of receiving the presentation? Any opposed? Thank you. Now moving on to the report and the recommendations in the report. Can I have a motion to approve the recommendations in the report as outlined? And Robin motion and Graham second. Can I have a show of hands for all in favor of accepting the report and the recommendations? Are there any opposed? Thank you. So let's move on to general information and other business in the agenda. In terms of 13.1 buildings and landscapes, is there anyone today with a proposed addition to our lists of buildings and landscapes? Tim.
Yes, through the chair. I'm wondering about adding 120 Park Street to our buildings of concern. It's a Rastrich house that has burned. The entire roof was gone. Robin knows this one very well. And it's been scaffolded, but it seems to have been shuttered for quite some time since. So I would like to add that on there. And I'd also like, through the chair, to see if we could send a request to staff for an update on that property in regards to permits and direction on what's happening with it. I don't believe it's a designated one, but I think it is on our registry of, on our list at minimum. So that would be there. I would think it would be, if it's not on that list, it would be black. If at the very thing, I'd recommend it to go on to the red.
Are there any other thoughts from the committee about this property? May I have a motion to approve the addition to our list? And for now, why don't we list it as a red or a property at risk, given the concerns that we've heard so far? So may I have a motion then to approve the addition of 120 Park Street as a red property, and Graham and Janice are motioning and seconding that. All in favor? Can I have a show of hands? Are there any opposed for 120 Park Street? No. Okay. So then we'll add it and we will direct, sorry, Lauren?
Can we also ask that who will be watching over the property for the list?
Thank you. Do we have a volunteer from the committee to watch the property? Sounds like Robin is volunteering, which is terrific. I think I know the property too. Yeah. Another beautiful stone building. Anyway, okay. Thank you, Robin. And why don't we move forward then to 13.1? Sorry, Will, is there a question? Okay. Spoke too soon.
Near the corner of Academy and Wilson in Lancaster. Is that already a designated property? And do we have it on our list? Because apparently it's at risk in some way because we're talking about moving it around the corner. Can somebody clarify that for me?
Sorry, I didn't hear you completely.
Okay.
Can you repeat it perhaps a little louder?
Property at the opticians located near the corner of Wilson and Academy in Lancaster. The property is apparently under a development proposal to move it. And it's a very old building. I'm just asking, is it already designated? And even if it is, should we still be watching it on our watch list?
Comment? We don't have the address here. Does staff have a comment?
So through the chair, yes, the Tree building that Will's referencing, it is individually designated underneath the Ontario Heritage Act.
Okay.
I can't remember the address off the top of my head, but I know exactly the property he's talking about.
You believe it's designated?
Oh, I know it's designated.
It's designated, thank you.
We don't hear about it, like they're already talking the proposal and what they're doing. You know, when will we hear about it, or?
Yeah.
That's my question.
So the committee can consider it, I mean, or add it to the list, absolutely. However, somebody should take it on the committee if we deem it's worthwhile, given that there's protection by the city already, that it's a heritage property. There is some level of, there already. I have 2 properties in Ancaster already that I'm watching over at this point. I'm not familiar, I should know that area, but I'm not familiar with it. I will take the action item to look at that in the next month or so, because I've got to look at the other Ancaster properties as part of my efforts, and I'll report back at the next meeting. So I'll have the address and such, and if, so what I'm suggesting, Will, is let's defer to the next meeting, and I'll take it as an action item. Thank you. And I'll have a recommendation to whether, if we do, whether it should be red, yellow, green, or black. Okay, are there any other properties? Any other proposed additions to our list of buildings and landscapes at this point? Okay, let's move on to endangered buildings and landscapes, the red category. I'll ask you to please raise your hand to report on the properties as I read through the list. So the Tivoli at 108 James Street North, for Tim. No report.
There was an article in the paper for Paul Wilson, did it? An update on that.
Thank you. Yeah, as Robin mentioned, there's an interesting article talking about the current owner and what he has not done to this point. So it's worth, for the committee's benefit, it's worth reading that article in the Spectator from Mr. Wilson. Moving on, number 2, the Andrew Sloss House at 372 Butter Road West in Ancaster. That's under my portfolio, and I have no update on that property. The third one, Century Manor at 100 West 5th Street for Graham. No change. Number 4, the Beach Canal Lighthouse and Cottage. Robin?
Some significant changes there. The federal feds have allowed access to the Keepers College for a assessment of its integrity, and the Beach Lighthouse Group is going to look at restoring it.
Thank you. Let's move on to number 5, 18 to 22 and 20. And number 6, 18 to 22 and 24 to 28 King Street West. Nothing new there. Number 7, 2 Hat Street in Dundas. Karen?
Yeah, so as I said last time, there's nothing going on with the building, but at least there is maintenance going on the outside. They are keeping the grass cut, which means somebody's paying attention to the property in some way. Doesn't look like there's any kind of development inside or outside physically.
Thank you. Number 8, the James Street Baptist Church at 98 James Street South. Janice?
Obviously behind schedule because nothing is happening. However, Hugh Development said that they would have a report for me next week, and they said it was just a blip in what was going on, so I'm not sure what that blip is. Thank you.
Okay, so number 9, 828 Sanatorium Road. Graham?
On the way down here today, I stopped by the property again, and once again, the back door has been kicked in. The frame's damaged now. They're gonna be very lucky to find a way to secure it without replacing the door frame. And someone smashed the wood over the portico at the front to gain access on the inside, so now that's open to the weather. So demolition by neglect is on schedule.
Thank you. Moving on to the yellow category for buildings and landscapes. The first one, Delta High School, 1284 Main Street East. David?
Nothing, of course, the report right now, the school is, of course, will be vacant, and I haven't anything further there.
So number 2 is 2251 Rama Road East in Stoney Creek, Elfrida. Bill took this on. I just drove by the other day, and this was a property that I had on my list. I hadn't been by there in quite some time. There's lots of new signs about new owners and new changes and stuff like that for the restaurant, but there's been no changes to the property itself. Number 3, the former Valley City Manufacturing at 64 Hat Street in Dundas. Aaron?
The property isn't really physically changing. They continue to try and lease it. I understand they have some small business moving in, but nothing significant yet, and certainly no construction changes at all at this point.
Thank you. Moving on to number 4, the St. Joseph's Mother House, 574 North Cliff Avenue in Dundas, and this is for Will as well. No changes. Number 5, the Copley Building, 104 King Street West and 56 York. Graham, do you have an update?
I've seen no changes. The roof still hasn't been replaced properly yet.
Okay, no changes. And number 6, moving on, is the 1021 Garner Road East, the Lampman House in Ancaster. There's been no changes visible from the roadway that I can see. Just drove by that the other day. Number 7, the Dunnington Grubb Gardens, 1000 Main Street East. David?
Yes, there has been some discussion with Chris Redfern about the damage to the Dunnington Grubb Monument. It seems the city isn't interested in repairing it, so we'll be having a meeting this month with the Friends of Gage Park, or I'll be having a meeting with Friends of Gage Park to see about replacing that that map on the back of the monument. The monument is a city monument. It is no longer part of the Friends of Gage Park interest, but not involvement. And also, on those gardens and around the monument, in a preliminary discussion about bringing tourists into the city to view our other Dunnington Grubb sites, along with this one, the gardens in that area are not up to par for bringing people into the area. So the Friends of Gage Park will have to have a discussion with the park's maintenance people and also repairing that monument before we could move forward on any further direction on bringing tourists to the area. When it was looked at, the area had grown up with weeds and there was considerable garbage around it. And this is surprising because the rest of the park is actually very nice. So, so we're going to have to work on this, whether we have to bring volunteers in or spend money from the Friends of the Park in order to bring this up to par, to move forward with our direction. We'll have to keep you informed on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to number 8, 1 St. James Place in Hamilton. No change. Number 9, St. Clair Boulevard, the Conservation District. David?
We have a few issues there. There has been staff was informed about a situation at 189, and they have been looking into that. Some stairs have been replaced, and a concrete pad replaced as well at this point, and it looks pretty much up to what it was previously. So that is moving forward, and staff is looking into that that address. The district, 3 members of the district have had a meeting with forestry to discuss the tree on Delaware and St. Clair. And it has been decided that the tree will be replaced with a maple blaze tree, and it'll be brought in line with the other trees. And I believe a permit has been put forward by forestry on that. Now, there also was a discussion to put another tree in on the second boulevard, but apparently no permit has been put forward for that. And that really is just to some succession planning to cover some of the trees that are starting to decline. There is another issue, and this has to do with 219. This property, in an original tour that Miranda and some of the other members of our committee went through the boulevard some time ago when she first came to Hamilton, and 219 was pointed out as an issue where the front yard had been changed substantially, the driveway widened substantially, and this really is a particularly bad issue because the owner at 183, which was fined for moving his driveway 5 inches, is saying now that his fine should be returned if there's no action going to be taken on 219. And this was the whole reason that we are actually going through a review of our heritage plan. So there will be further action on this. It seems that the owner at 283 would like to take further action on this with the councillor, and so it's starting to get a little bit to the point where I think some discussion is going to have to be had on what has taken place in 219. At any rate, that can be discussed at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, number 10, 51 Herkimer. No change, thank you, Janice. And number 9, 52 to 56 Charlton Avenue West, no change. That is a good thing. Number 12 is 292 Dundas Street West in Waterdown. Lynn, no change, thank you. And let's move on to the heritage properties in the green category, the ones whose status is stable. Oh, yes, sorry.
Put my mic on, thank you. So just before we go on, because I was trying to get the information, just going back to item 4 of the yellow St. Joseph's Mother House, I'm not sure if everyone's aware that there was a presentation at Planning Committee that it's being taken over as a temporary use by Columbia College. So there'll be users in there continuing on. They have a 3-year, they've applied and they've gotten a 3-year temporary use permit to house students in there for the next while until I guess they determine what best use is going forward for this facility. And I just noticed, and I appreciate Janice mentioning, 1 St. James Place, they did have a heritage permit review and some work will be going on. That's in our yellow papers, okay? Yep, perfect, thank you.
Yes, so just to clarify on 1 St. James Place, and there's other members here who were there as well. You're right, it was, or as Janice mentioned, it was reviewed at the Heritage Permit Review. A gentleman now has, at least at that time, had a tentative deal to buy the property. He submitted cosmetic changes to the property, like the garage door, adding a vent, those type of things, and doing some initial work. And the committee, the Heritage Permit Subcommittee recommended the council approve it going forward. Thank you. Okay. Let me move on then to the green category. Number 1 is the Royal Connaught Hotel. Well, okay, we've got several requests, sorry.
Through the chair, Councillor Pearson, you were mentioning about St. Joe's Mother House, St. Joseph's Convent. Are they taking over part of the facility, or are they taking it over completely? They've had part of the property for a long while.
I believe it's all of it for a 3-year term, and then they'll be determining what, going forward, whether, you know, what other development may occur around this building. I believe it's all of it. I think all of the nuns are moving out, and I believe they're also moving the interred nuns out of the grave that's on site as well.
Really?
Oh, okay. So this is the Columbia College is going into this particular facility. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
And do you have a question, Robin? A comment?
Just a comment. If you want to get onto the heritage site in St. Clair Boulevard, there's a property for sale, the Musitano building.
Also talked about in the Spectator a lot recently. So, thank you. On to the, if I can move on to the green properties. And number 1, the Royal Connaught Hotel. Tim, no change. Number 2, Akmar. Can you talk to that, Robin?
There's nothing going forward at the moment, but there will be an event for the Friends of Akmar at the end of October at the Westdale Theatre. We'll be showing the movie The Warriors.
Okay. Thank you. Number 3, Treble Hall at 4 through 12 John Street North. Tim?
Just a small note, I was looking into it, we had discussed what the usage of the building has been. There's been some commercial additions as well in the last year. Sort of an occult shop or something has moved in between the Toast Wine Bar and the pizza place. But I also noticed just in the searching that the units above are being used as an Airbnb service, so that possibly could, you know, cause a large amount of turnover of people through the upper units of it, but I believe any of the features of it are basically exterior at this stage, at any rate.
Thank you. So let's move on. The number 4, the 104 King Street West in Dundas, the former post office. Karen?
No change.
And number 5, Forest Avenue in Hamilton. Graham? No change. And finally, on to the blacklist at Heritage Properties, the Ockmar Gatehouse at 71 Claremont Drive. Robin, do you have an update?
Just that I talked to staff, and they were going to have internal discussions to see if the proposal was okay, and they would have to talk to the owner to see if there's a transfer. And I have
Proposals to move the,
the proposal to move the gatehouse.
okay.
But to get, that's the cart, we need to get to the horse. So,
Okay.
so that you have to have the conversation with through the city with the owner to make that work.
Thank you. It's a big ask.
There's one other thing too that happened on the mountain, is that we lost a heritage building on James Street, Upper James, at Fennel. It was torn down. It was about 620 Upper James.
Okay. If there's no other updates, may I now have a motion to receive the updates as a whole? David and Graham seconded. Can I have a show of hands to receive the updates? Thank you. Any opposed? Is there any other business today before the committee people would like to bring forward at this time? If not, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? David, seconded by Graham. And can I have a show of hands to adjourn the meeting? Thank you. Any opposed? I suspect not. Thank you.